Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Cullen, and I'm the Associate Director of the University of Rochester Susan B. Anthony Centre. The Susan B. Anthony Centre works to bring awareness to and advocate for social justice and equality. We work in collaboration with the university community and partner with a wide range of local, national, and international organizations to fulfill our goal of translating research into policy. We would like to welcome you to our Addressing Community and Equity series and our panel discussion, Domestic Violence, the Practical and Policy Landscapes. We would like to express our thanks to our panelists and moderator for agreeing to participate. Please note this webinar is being recorded and you may type your comments and questions in the chat box as we proceed. As we begin, I would like to offer a land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge with respect the Seneca Nation known as the Great Hill People and keepers of the Western Door of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. We take this opportunity to thank the original caretakers on whose ancestral lands the University of Rochester now stands. Please note that you can access full bios for our panelists on the Susan B. Anthony Centre website. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our panel moderator, a dear friend and colleague, Dr. Catherine Cerulli, Professor of Psychiatry and Director of the Susan B. Anthony Centre at the University of Rochester.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, John, for the introduction, and welcome everyone, and thank you for being here. We have a lot of friends in attendance today, people who actually are partners with us in this work that we're doing. We have people joining us today from Willow, from the University of Rochester Medical Center, serving clients who experience violence in their lives, as well as community partners. We thank each of you for being here. And we're looking forward to a dialogue when the presenters have completed their presentations. We are going to talk today about community collaborations, a wonderful organization called SAFER. We're going to be talking about the HEAL Collaborative, and then I'm going to be speaking briefly about the policy landscape regarding domestic violence and where we are currently. I'd like to introduce our two speakers, Ellen Polshak and Michelle Requa. Ellen is a professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Obstetrics and Gynecology. She's the academic chief of the Division of Collaborative Care and Wellness, and I believe the HEAL Collaborative is a great example of that. She is also the director of the Program for Women's Mental Health and Wellness, as well as the HEAL Collaborative. You can learn more about Ellen, as John said, on our website. I'd like to also introduce a friend and colleague and collaborator, Michelle, who is a partner that we could not have been presenting today without her energy and commitment to people in our community who have experienced domestic violence. Michelle earned her bachelor's degree at SUNY Brockport and her master's degree from Simon Business School. She also facilitated during her Simon experience, having her colleagues assist us in creating the very first business plan for the HEAL Collaborative. She currently works as a finance manager for 8 departments. You heard that right, 8 departments at the University of Rochester. Michelle was a member of our leadership team for one of our PCORI grants and was very instrumental in the formation of the HEAL Clinic. I am now going to pass it over to Michelle, and she is going to start us off, and look forward to rejoining you after Ellen's talk.
So let's start with some statistics. About 1 in 5 women and about 1 in 7 men report having experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. About 1 in 5 women and 1 in 12 men have experienced contact sexual violence by an intimate partner. And 10% of women and 2% of men report having been stalked by an intimate partner. Next slide, please. SAFER. So what exactly is SAFER, of which I am a member? We are a group of survivors who strive to be agents of change so that all people will be safe from domestic violence. We do this by advocating for legislation and community outreach. In one of our meetings, there were a few of us who had gone through the whole process of leaving our abusers and discussed how overwhelmed we felt by the number of places we had to navigate in order to survive. None of our providers were talking to each other, and there were so many places to go through the process. And how do you explain all of these absences to the person who's abusing you? We started discussing what we thought would be a good solution to this. And we wanted to make it better for others that came behind us. We thought a one-stop shop was the answer. Domestic violence victims could go to one safe place to get safety planning, individual and group therapy, legal help, social work help, coordination with their medical provider, and education, all with a team to coordinate this. Kate had been talking with us on and off and heard our idea, and she sort of ran with it. And she formed our first community advisory board. We went through some different funding, some different grants, and finally, 5 years ago, we got a grant and the HEAL Collaborative was born. At HEAL, we partner with individuals who have experienced interpersonal, intimate violence and those that care for them. Our goal is to help individuals become empowered to take steps toward greater safety, stability, and health by offering acceptance, hope, support, and skills. We accomplish this by providing accessible and inclusive services encompassing education, connection to resources, advocacy, and healthcare. So our URMC partners are the Emergency Department, Obstetrics and Gynecology, Pediatrics, the Psychiatry Department, many primary care practices, and the Social Work Department. In addition to those, the Department of Psychiatry, the Lab for Interpersonal Violence and Victimization is a partner. The Susan B. Anthony Center, Public Safety. Our community partners include Willow, Resolve, which is now part of Willow, SAFER, Legal Aid Society, the Rochester Police Department, Lifespan, and Sathi. Next slide, please. This is our community advisory board in very fine print. But let me just say that on the advisory board, we have 5 survivors. We have a member from the VA, someone from Willow, someone from Resolve, someone from the DA's office, a person from Rochester Police Department, a person from Greece Police Department, a social worker, someone from Jordan Health Center, and an OB-GYN provider from the University of Rochester. Next slide, please. Thank you. The HEAL team consists of full-time staff. There's a social worker. The Willow Advocate is on site. There's an on-site therapist, and we have a receptionist. We have supervisor consultants that an attorney, primary care physician, psychologist, and a senior social worker. Next slide, please. In the HEAL Collaborative, it is interdisciplinary and team-based. It's biopsychosocial, patient-centered, focus on population health, standardized assessment of outcomes. There's close collaboration with primary care, other medical providers, and community providers. And it's located at URMC in the Department of Psychiatry. Next slide, please. HEAL services. We consult with providers. There's patient consultation and planning. There's follow-up with the patients. There's documentation and collaboration, education, individual and group therapy services, social work services, Willow services, legal clinics, and referrals. All what I was asking for. Next slide, please. Ellen?
Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Dr. Cerulli. I guess first, as somebody who was invited into this conversation, it has been such a privilege to get to work with both of you and with SAFER and all of our partners. And it's hard to believe that we really are here 5 years in, and I'm just really grateful for the opportunity. And I think one of the things that is so important and critical to HEAL's success is really what Michelle said specifically. And that is that it was really built on the shoulders of what people who were experiencing IPV were telling us, and really wanting to respond to that, and really understanding what is it that were some of the gaps and how can we do better. And in fact, really maybe gaps isn't the right word, because we have a community that's rich in resources that don't always work well together. Just because it is so overwhelming and complicated when you are trying to deal with your health issues and your safety issues and your housing issues, and it can be really overwhelming. And so really trying to bring that together as much as possible is a huge part of what we try and do. So just to outline a little bit more from what Michelle already started to talk about, who does HEAL serve? So really, we are pretty open to anyone who self-identifies as having had experience with interpersonal or intimate partner abuse or trauma. So anyone who self-identifies as having had a lifetime experience of being abused by a family member or a partner. And that can range from a huge variety of things, from somebody who may be at immediate risk and not safe in this moment, to somebody who has a history of abuse in their relationship and maybe in a new relationship and wanting to not repeat the pattern. And so you can see we have a range of people who might want to leave or not want to leave, or just trying to make sense of what they want. And they may want psychotherapy, they may want just more information, whatever it is that they're looking for. And most of the services are free of charge. We do have to use insurance for the psychotherapy piece of our services, but other than that, we've been able to piece together enough resources to be able to make it available to people. And of course, Willow is a critically important partner. We're lucky enough to have a Willow advocate as part of our team, and we work really closely with Willow. And Willow is the best bet for emergency and services outside of the workday, because we're just not set up to respond to immediate crisis situations. We really view ourselves as well poised to partner as part of health and healthcare in the way it is delivered in an integrated way. Next slide, please. So Kate asked me to pull together some data, and I was excited to have a chance to do this. So this gives you a sense of the number of new patients that we've been seeing over time. And you can see overall, despite the ups and downs, it has steadily grown. And we keep having more new patients come all the time, except with a major dip. And you probably won't be surprised if you take a look, and that we had a huge dip in services in March of 2020. And that was really alarming and a very scary time to us as we tried to regroup and think about how can we keep people connected and know what's happening in the community for people who are experiencing IPV, knowing how isolated people were and how fearful people were to leave their homes, and how much we were trying to keep ourselves and health and everybody safe on our team as well. And so we were really relieved that you can see pretty quickly we were able to start getting ourselves back out there again and still having new patients arrive to us. And the other thing that I think was related to the dip in referrals is it's not that many of the people who would normally refer to us, as you can see, primary care physicians or people in the community, during the early stages of COVID, people weren't going to those places either, school and workplaces. So people were really isolated. But then you can see we have been able to be really busy since then, and our numbers have continued to increase. Next slide, please. So also just to give you a sense of our numbers since we've started. So the number of patients that we've seen each year and the number of visits that we've had. And you can see that we've been busy. And also, I think interestingly here, you can see a dip in numbers in 2020, which again is probably related to the dip that you saw, but how high the number of visits were, and that our numbers of visits continue to increase. And you can see we're on track for that this year too. So I think there are probably two reasons that we see increases in numbers of visits compared to numbers of people. And these are just guesses. One is that we've started to offer groups, so people are able to get more care through group treatment, and we have more staff than we did. We actually now have 2 therapists. And also, I think the needs are greater, so people's length of stay with us has increased because the severity of the problems that people have been facing has been more difficult during the pandemic. And so the same individual may have more visits with us. Okay, next slide, please. So I just wanted to walk you through the HEAL model here. So Michelle did a great job kind of outlining what some of the different services are and to walk through the different ways that people come to us. So if you look at, I'll start with the upper right-hand side there. Kate, I don't know if you have a pointer where you can point or not, but there you go, thank you. So that's where many people who are either in the community or in our outpatient health clinics would first come to us, and they would come to our outpatient center at the Department of Psychiatry. And then you can see at the first purple box there, registration and promote health printout. So they would schedule an appointment and come in, and the first thing everybody does is who's comfortable doing it, it's not a requirement, is complete a screening on a tablet, which has a series of screens just to help us make sure that we've covered all the different domains that we want to be thinking about. And then it creates a personalized list of resources of things that might be helpful to that person called Promote Health. And then they meet with a social worker who goes over their answers and the report, as well as their reasons for coming in. And the social worker really works to develop a plan with the person about what it is that he or she or they are hoping to accomplish. And so are they wanting a safety plan? Are they wanting to just learn more about what is domestic violence? Are they looking for referrals? Do they want some trauma-focused psychotherapy? And so together they develop a plan. And then based on that plan, a variety of things could happen. And so the individual moves forward from there, depending on what they want. It could be that that's all they needed was just to meet with somebody that one time and then they're done, or they could move on to meet with a social worker again, or one of these boxes below. So all the way on the left, you can see IPV advocate. So that is a Willow advocate who's able to help with a variety of services, including learning about legal resources, orders of protection, developing a safety plan, helping people get to court, learning about access to resources such as shelter, and really supporting the individual in trying to go to court also, if they can accompany them to court if that's what they want. Next, you'll see the next box is psychotherapy. So although there are many places in our community where you can get general psychotherapy, we really try and offer trauma-focused, evidence-based psychotherapy. So we have 2 psychotherapists who are really well trained in a range of evidence-based psychotherapy approaches and really work with patients on doing that trauma-focused work. Next, you'll see in the next box is legal consultation. So we have a close collaboration with Just Cause and Legal Aid Society, where they can provide free legal consultation to individuals who want to learn about things like divorce and custody, and see if they qualify to apply for a free or subsidized cost attorney to work with them on their legal needs. And then in the last box on the right, we have primary care support and evidence collection. So we have close relationships with people who provide trauma-informed primary care for patients who aren't connected with primary care. And also we can do evidence collection for people who might want that for legal purposes later. And then you can also see in the top left-hand side here, we have people who referred to us on the inpatient units in the emergency department. So this is one of the more innovative components of HEAL that I think is really great. And that is that the Willow Advocate, the IPV Advocate can actually go to where the patient is and provide those services bedside. And the very first time I saw this happen was with a patient who had was pregnant and had experienced a gunshot wound from her partner and was hospitalized as a result. And typically she would have to wait till she was discharged from the hospital and then go to court in order to initiate an order of protection. But because we are able to offer these orders by Skype through the Willow Advocate, and the patient doesn't actually have to go to court to get the process started. And the advocate was able to initiate this process bedside so the patient could leave the hospital with a little less fear when it was time to go. And then when the patient is stabilized, if they choose, they can return back to us on an outpatient basis and they would start on that outpatient path. Okay, next slide, please. So I think I may have provided a lot of this information already but I'll just go through what each of these roles are. So we have the social worker at HEAL, next slide. And to be more specific about the services that the social worker can provide, the social worker offers comprehensive biopsychosocial assessment, crisis and supportive counseling, trauma-informed psychoeducation, so the power and control wheel or other information that people might need to learn about, basic safety planning to make sure that they have a good plan in place to be able to walk out of the office and perhaps to make a plan to leave their partner if that's what they want. We work really closely with the other people who are in the individual's life and to make sure that we're trying to make as cohesive and team-based care as possible and to link with resources to help with safety and stability, security, coordinate all of the other services that we're doing. And also to provide consultation as needed. And sometimes what we find is that the social worker will also, if we don't have room available right away for the psychotherapy or other resources, the social worker can continue to meet with the patient until we're able to get that person to the other services that we're waiting for. So the social worker really serves as the glue. Next slide, please. So the Willow Advocate, next slide. So we're really lucky to have this close partnership with Willow and to be able to have an advocate as part of our team. And this has been a process to go through figuring out logistically how to be able to have our Willow Advocate actually be part of the team in a way that they can chart in the medical record and go onto the floors and communicate in the same way that any other health professional could. And that has really been critical to establishing a team-based approach when that's what the patient wants. Of course, the patient is always in control of how the information is shared and what we do with that information. But the Willow Advocate provides support and advocacy, crisis counseling, safety planning, and education, can review legal options and help connect people with attorneys who have specific DV experience. As I already mentioned, helping with filing orders of protection and facilitating Skype appearances, and they float around our system wherever they're needed and work to help link with services and supports that are offered by the Willow Center. And for those of you who may not be familiar, Willow has an amazing range of resources available to people, including the crisis hotline, which I already mentioned, and shelter, which is what Willow often is known for, but it has also a huge educational arm, which can come into different services at the hospital or into the community to teach us to learn more about how to talk about domestic violence with people. They have a counseling center, a children's program, court advocacy at court to provide support to people going through the court appearance experience, and some supportive housing, as well as the HEAL partnership. And then mental health therapists at HEAL. So as I mentioned, we already have 2 and we may get a 3rd. So next slide, please. So we really focus on trauma-focused psychotherapy. So we really are identifying people who are ready to address the impact that their experience with trauma has had on their lives. And the therapies that we're able to offer include trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, cognitive processing therapy, schema therapy, compassion-focused therapy, interpersonal therapy. What isn't on here yet is that we just got, one of our therapists was just trained in EMDR, and one was just trained in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. So we're continuing to add to our skill set here. And they work closely with the team and help with risk assessment and safety planning. So if we have somebody come in who may really be expressing significant concerns around suicide or homicide, who is working with a different team member, they assist with that as well, again, as trying to collaborate. Oh, and consultation, I'm glad that we have this here. One of the things that Michelle went through, but I didn't unpack, is that we also really make ourselves available as consultants to anyone who is working with someone who has experiences with domestic violence. And we really try and support providers or other clinicians who may be trying to figure out how to support the person that they're working with. So sometimes that can mean a call where I'm worried to let my patient leave the office. What should I do? Or we sometimes do joint appointments where we will actually join a healthcare provider in a visit, or sometimes we go and do clinics in different medical practices to provide consultation on site at the clinics. So we do provide a lot of consultation to our colleagues as well as to individuals. So to refer to HEAL, it's easy. Anyone can just call the phone number or fax. And then for anyone within our system who's working in eRecord, we have an electronic referral you can use. So we hope you'll think about sending people to us. And here is our contact information for our current clinicians. And so HEAL is 4325 if you want the direct phone number. So that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ellen, so much for walking us through that, and Michelle for giving us a great overview of the history. Just want to take a moment to sort of celebrate, and I'll leave the numbers up for just a little while, to celebrate the progress of the HEAL Clinic, that it's still operating in partnership with our community partners and advocates. And one of the reasons I do that is because medical law partnerships have been around for a long time, which is the model this is based on. They're slightly different than family justice centers. But this particular medical law partnership is unique. As Ellen and Michelle both mentioned, people can get protection orders as part of their health care. And orders of protection can be considered public health tools because we know that protection orders can reduce future violence and can also help improve mental health based on some of the work that we've done. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are as a nation with the landscape of myriad domestic violence policies and explore, and thanks to my friend Greg for offering the next two slides, to explore really how we come together as the private and public sector to try to facilitate change. This model is not necessarily specific to intimate partner violence or even domestic violence, child abuse and neglect, elder abuse. This really fits many social issues that we have and health problems that we have. The reason I'm sharing this just to show the complexity. Often when people are frustrated in the field of intimate partner violence, we think we need a new law and we try to get a new statute passed. And I would suggest that we consider, when we're thinking about our legal strategic planning as a field, that we consider the multiple ways we can affect change, including laws that already exist but are either being underutilized or are not being used the manner in which they could. As most of you know from your middle school and high school civics classes, we have the executive branch, we have judiciary, we have interest groups, we have Congress, and all of these groups push together from the private and the public sector to create change. We have an idea that comes to the table, perhaps a legislative breakfast that the local domestic violence consortium might hold, and an idea gets put on the table. The idea for HEAL is an example of that. What was the holdup? We couldn't do Skype orders of protection. How did we fix that? We needed to have a change which allowed that to happen, and it started with a pilot to allow a couple of pilot sites to be set up to allow orders of protection to happen remotely. This was pre-COVID, so this was pretty progressive if you think about it. Now everything feels like it's happening over the internet. But it's important when we're thinking about the state of the field currently, what we need, how we need it, and where we need it. It may be that we need to create more private sector partnerships. It may be that we need to reach out more to the public sector. It may be that there are judicial cases which are being issued that are changing the landscape. That means we go back to the drawing board and we need to think about a new law. Why? Because once the courts have ruled, it changes the game. It can change the game depending on the holding, as we're seeing right now in our reproductive social justice landscape in the United States. So it's very important that as we're considering moving the field forward, especially when new science comes out that we feel is evidence-based, that we realize all the partners that need to be on the table to create change. We need to have representatives from all the branches of the government present. We need to be thinking about think tanks and pulling in partners who have influence at the federal or state levels. We need to be thinking about who might be our friendly legislators. For those of you who had the opportunity to listen to the VAWA hearing, Violence Against Women Act, on October 5th, it was remarkable how many congressional delegates spoke about their experiences with victimization, either personally, someone in their family, someone that they knew, or constituents. These are people who may be more friendly to the issue and be willing to meet and listen to ideas about how to move the field forward. There are think tanks that are created to study and translate science into practice. So these are other partners that we should be thinking about having at the table. As we move forward in thinking about who our partners are, we often think about the CDC or the Department of Justice, but each entity in the government has a lot of divisions within it that could be friendly and be promulgating rules and regulations around intimate partner violence. So when you're thinking about putting together your strategy as an organization in the field of domestic violence, if you are thinking about funding, if you are thinking about rules and regulations that will be helpful for you, be thinking broadly across systems and silos that normally we may not go to for our particular field. And that's in part because our funding is also siloed. Much domestic violence funding comes through the Department of Justice via the Violence Against Women Act grant or through the Centers for Disease Control. The other thing to consider from these particular entities is what they already have that will help us. For instance, the Center for Disease Control put out a toolkit to help think about how to curb domestic violence, how to prevent it, not just how to respond to it. These are available and free online. When you think about SAMHSA under the COVID relief dollars, SAMHSA has streams of money coming now that can help address mental health and substance abuse. And where are those dollars going in our communities? How can we partner with them, knowing what Ellen and Michelle just spoke of, that there are mental health consequences when you are a victim. You might have depression, you might have post-traumatic stress disorder, you could have a host of medical conditions that are comorbid. So how do we think strategically about our funding and our legislative agendas that's going to cut across all of these entities and silos? Before we open it up for questions in a little bit, I'm just going to talk a little bit about rulemaking. When we think about a law being passed, Congress passes a law, they authorize something new, exciting perhaps. It's a long process before we see it on the streets and in action. An agency must develop a proposed rule. Then there's an office which reviews it. Then there's agencies that publish the rules in the federal registers. That moves on to agencies reviewing public comments. And this is when it's a really important opportunity to provide comments I know Tiffany is on this webinar, and we had changes to how we would respond as universities to sex assault on campus. And there was a huge public comment opportunity for public comments to come in and get to the organizations and agencies within the government that were responsible for promulgating the new rules. It's an important part that we often don't think about. The final rule gets reviewed, and then it is published in the Federal Register. Congress can review that rule. The rule may be changed, as I said, by a court. If there's litigation around a particular rule, part of a rule could be vacated or the entire rule could be vacated. It's really important that we think about violence, eradicating violence, preventing it, and responding to it as part of our civic duty. And how can we do that? We can be present at public hearings. We can listen online to what our senators are doing. The judiciary hearing on October 5th was available to the public. You simply had to log on and watch the hearing happen in real time. There are transcripts. If you have a job and you can't log on in the middle of the day, you're able to access transcripts that are available about what happened in those meetings. You can provide your input to your local, state, and federal representatives in a way that's meaningful. We often try to meet with the elected official, but having just worked in Washington, D.C. for a year, and I spent my last several months with Senator Murphy's office, I was amazed at how much work the teams are doing with partnerships with the senator, and that they know the ins and outs of rules and legislation, especially the health team. It was amazing to watch law in action as it was being formulated and considered. It was just an incredible opportunity. So your input matters. Your representatives want to hear from you and want to hear about your experiences. And public notice and comments matter as a member of our public. What I do want to mention briefly is this notion that when I was working in Albany, looking at legislation, is what we call an empty envelope. We need to be very careful that the laws that we are passing are not just articulated well and the rules make sense, but that they're well funded, that there is room at the table for implementation and evaluation. An example of that is the new Domestic Violence Survivor Justice Act, which passed a year and a half ago in New York State, where people who are incarcerated for 8 or more years, where intimate partner family violence and trauma is a substantial component of their lived experience and a significant contributing factor to the event for which they are incarcerated or about to be incarcerated. It's imperative that when there is a hearing and someone is released, that we have the means to provide people with housing and mental health help if they need it. Some sort of means to break the isolation down, support groups. These are not things that are necessarily going to be thought of at the legislative time, but maybe in the rules and rulemaking, and definitely at the local level for our implementation. Very often domestic violence funding comes to communities as an afterthought, as opposed to a way to prevent other social determinants of health. If we invested in this field and offered resources to people who are experiencing violence, we would by default see a reduction in homelessness, for instance, because those things are very connected. There is an intersectionality to intimate partner violence and domestic violence, more broadly defined, child abuse, sibling abuse, and elder abuse, where we see the interconnectivity with things like homelessness, poverty, leaving your schooling, having your work life sabotaged, and other things that make it difficult to have a life where you feel secure and safe. When we talk about intersectionality, that word means many things to many people. And in this case, I share it because every survivor has a different lived experience based on who they are. And all of our entities and organizations need to be paying attention to meeting the needs of diverse people and seeing that their experience can be helped with the resources that we have. I was very fortunate this morning to participate in an international webinar, and they talked about the needs of people who are differently abled, have minority status for different parts of their life. They may be afraid to seek help. They may have an immigration issue. They may be afraid of law enforcement for reasons, for things that had happened in their neighborhood. So when we consider the go-to strategies that are typically used in the United States, especially with all 50 states having mandatory arrest laws or pro-arrest laws and pro or evidence-based prosecution, that's not always the option for people, which is why the interdisciplinary case conferences that Ellen was talking about are so helpful. It provides the opportunity for multiple disciplines to come together and talk about some cases. I want to talk just briefly about the case consultation arm at HEAL, and the few that I have been able to participate in have been illuminating. And there's often not an answer that will come about as a matter of people sitting together at the table, but it is a brainstorming opportunity where if the lawyers have a case coming up and they know that it could trigger trauma for the client, they'll be able to talk with the mental health provider at the table how to ground the client while they're providing testimony or they're sitting at the table. These case consultations require creative rulemaking as well, because we are traditionally bound by privilege, confidentiality. In the case of the interdisciplinary case conferences at HEAL, it is the client that waives in and provides a uniform waiver, while some entities still require their own waiver in order to participate. But I think that is one idea where we have a unique opportunity to cross silos. The other areas that we know are affecting survivors that need policy work include when there are natural disasters and shelters either close, or as we saw in a storm not that long ago, the ceiling fell in at one of our nation's shelters. So it's important to be thinking when there are natural disasters happening, where are we with helping our domestic violence shelter and emergency housing have a plan for alternative housing? Where are they going to go? How are we going to house people if all of a sudden their safe house becomes unsafe because of weather or other things that could happen? We also know that supply chains are affecting survivors. There has been a disruption in birth control, for instance, which could result, as we know nationally, in a number of increased unplanned pregnancies. So these are things that touch the lives of survivors. These are policies that we don't often think about as connected to our field, but they are policies we need to be watching because they do impact the clients that we work with. There is, in brief, the saying, it takes a village. And I just want to note that there are many people on this webinar who helped HEAL happen. And there are a number of people who aren't ever noted in helping HEAL happen because they're behind the scenes. Corey Nichols Hadid was very instrumental in helping the HEAL office open. Holly Murphy and Natalie Maya Dixon were very helpful, helping us understand the fiscal administration and assisting in those processes. Our community advisory board has already been thanked by Michelle. We also have the Willow Advocates. We've had several pass through the halls of our hospital, and all of them have been enthusiastic and all in to help the people that they're serving, braving it, heading into the emergency department and into really difficult scenes and scenarios themselves. We have also had a tremendous amount of students who have participated and helped us with different interviews and reaching out to patients, and our undergraduate and graduate students and medical students have all played a pivotal role in making this happen. So the other person we'd like to thank is our program officer at PCORI. This HEAL clinic opened originally with funding from a 3-year PCORI grant, and it is now, as Ellen indicated, independently operating. And the webinar content is solely the responsibility of the authors and doesn't represent the official views of PCORI. I'm also going to be opening it up now for questions and answers, and I think that John will be helping us a little bit with our questions and answers. I don't see a bunch of them. Just to start out, I can let you know, Krista, that we will be able to share a version of these slides, and we can do that on our website once we're ready to post the video from today. We also will be sharing a video about HEAL. It was unveiled a little while ago, and we just are in the process of having closed captions put on. John may be able to show a version as we close out today after we answer questions and answers. So I am going to turn it over to John to moderate the Q&A.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you, Ellen and Michelle. So, folks, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them in chat. We do have one currently. It's a question from Victoria Ramos Rodriguez. During the pandemic, how did Willow and HEAL manage to help victims with the court system, especially with protection orders, and in a way to minimize re-victimization? I don't know if maybe Ellen, do you want to take that? Would you be the right person?
Sure, I'll take the first pass at that. And I think there's some people on this call who are from Willow who may be able to help answer some of this as well. So, so I'll answer for the HEAL perspective and then pause. So I think that this is something that we were all very worried about at the beginning, and court was amazing, like many of us, in its ability to shift to trying to start doing things remotely initially, so that services could be provided. So again, similar to our dip, court had a dip as well in terms of people being able to access services. But I think one of the things that we have thought a lot about is how do you deliver services virtually in a safe way? Because on one hand, while doing services remotely really improves access and has reduced a lot of barriers, it can really increase people's vulnerability substantially because you don't know who else might be present or might come upon somebody or overhear something, or whether they might be able to access it in some way. And so one of the things we really spent a lot of time doing, and in fact also did quite a few in-services throughout the university to help other people, is to really stop and think about how do you consider safety when you're trying to deliver services virtually, and what are some of the ways that you can, and explicitly remind people to be in a place that is private, develop a code word or prepare them to hang up if anything happens that isn't safe, if somebody walks in while they're not, to think about who else might have access to information such as their logins for their Zoom appointments through the medical record or other things like that, and really trying to help everybody just have that be a routine part of what we do as we initiate services. And so I think that was really important and has really changed the way we practice, because we do that for everybody all of the time now. I wonder if anybody from Willow wants to add some Willow specific things.
If any, I know there's a few folks on from Willow. If they want to add it into the chat box, that would be great. Just to answer sort of a generic question about orders of protection resulting in a minimization of re-victimization, there's a few caveats for that, Victoria, and that is the work that's come out on orders of protection and reducing future harm have some caveats. One is that the orders of protection are carefully crafted, and second, that there's an enforcement for those. Our work in Rochester showed that protection orders reduce mental health symptoms to a point, but sometimes people are still clinically significant in terms of needing assistance from a therapeutic provider, such as who they're finding at HEAL. The notion that HEAL was able to pivot as quickly as it was able to pivot during COVID and get up working remotely was pretty remarkable. And I think the fact that the courts were able to pivot, in fact, we are still doing some of the court work remotely in different locations, was also pretty incredible. I think it has taken a toll on the clients that are served, because I think it is extremely stressful for them to be on video if they have to be and don't have an attorney guiding them, sitting next to them, or an advocate in the courtroom with them. That's it.
Thanks, Kate. Sorry, go ahead, Ellen.
I was just going to add one more thing that I didn't say, and that is how we are going about it at this point now too, is that when people are able to, we're encouraging all initial appointments to be in person so that we can assess how it will be for them to do remote services. And then after that, we make a plan with them from there.
Thank you. So at the start, Michelle offered some data on the impact or how intimate partner violence affects men and women. Can someone speak to sort of the gender and gender identities of those that have been served over the past 4 or 5 years, and what you've been doing to be trying to do to be more inclusive?
Would you like me to answer that, or do one of you want to answer that?
I can answer a little bit of it. The recent numbers that we looked at from our PCORI study show that we did have people who were bisexual, gay, and lesbian utilizing HEAL. We did not have trans individuals in that analysis or people who identified. We do have periodic trainings there. I know that we have a wonderful consultant whose name is John Cullen, who has assisted in some of our policies and procedures. HEAL does serve people who identify as men. And very important that I don't want to gloss over is something that Ellen and Michelle both spoke to. Somebody does not have to be out of the relationship to receive services at HEAL. I think that is often not for Willow, but for some providers around the country, people have to be out of the relationship to receive services. So I think that's an important component. And Ellen, do you want to speak, or Michelle, more about the makeup of the people coming in currently?
Yeah, I don't think I can provide data for it, but we work really hard to make it clear that we're inclusive of anybody who wants to come in. And the last time I looked, we had a significant proportion of people who identified as queer, including trans and non-binary folks. And we have really worked hard to use language and have our marketing materials make it clear that everybody is welcome. And one of the things that we have just done is we used to only have group for women, and we have just changed it so that the group is offered, continuously. I think it's a 12-week group, and for the first time we're having a gender inclusive group, so anybody can sign up for it, regardless of gender identity, and not just women. So we're excited about that. I think we have a ways to go in terms of trying to make ourselves available to certain groups of people, including LGBTQ folks, making it clear that we want it to be a safe place and understanding what we need to do. And so we also welcome feedback and are continuing to work on that.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen. One of the things too I'd like to share as another resource is the Transform Center. That is a center that the University of Rochester is partnering with different places around the United States. It's funded by the National Institute for Child Maternal Health. And the reason I bring Transform up is because so many of the people that are receiving services in HEAL and other forward-facing agencies that provide information to survivors is that there are often comorbid childhood abuse histories that have happened, both for the people who are charged with perpetrating and the people who are the victims. Not always, but sometimes. And one way we can prevent intimate partner violence and domestic violence is to try to prevent child abuse and neglect as well. These resources are available for free on our website. There is a free curriculum on the understanding between intimate partner violence and suicide that's available, that was funded by the CDC. And Kirsten has just put that into the chat box if you want to visit that center. There are fact sheets that help explain the neurobiology of child abuse and neglect, what chronic stress looks like. So that is another resource that you can be utilizing. Michelle, did you want to speak about safer reaching out to different populations, or how SAFER is growing or changing?
SAFER is, COVID did a number on everybody, and it was tough getting back, and we're still doing Zoom meetings. So it's been tough getting out into the community and doing things, but we are really trying hard to get our act back together and reach out to community, the whole community. So the president of SAFER is Gina Cruz, and she has just wonderful connections all over the city. And yeah, so we're working, trying hard.
Thanks, Michelle.
If I could just throw one last thing, and one of the things that our community advisory board really stressed and pushed, including Gina as an advocate, was that we need all of the materials translated, including intake forms. We need to be thinking about the languages that are likely going to be walking in the door based on various immigration patterns that are happening in our own community. We are interviewing people who have experienced trafficking, and this is the first time we will be interviewing in, I believe it's Korean, French, Spanish, English, Punjab, I think is the last one. So, I mean, we are really needing to address intersectionality, including culture and language, in the work that we're all doing.
We have another question in the chat, and I actually think this is a topic we could have a whole separate webinar on. But do you work with partners who have perpetrated violence against the clients you serve?
It's a really important question and a really complicated one. And, you know, everybody needs care and services and support. And the only way we're going to stop DV is if we really work with the people who are engaging in aggressive behavior as well as the people experiencing it. And I think that although HEAL really, its primary mission is to support people who have experienced victimization by IPV, we also appreciate that often it's not black and white, and there is aggression that can happen that can go both ways in relationships. And so we recognize that sometimes some of the people that we've worked with may have engaged in perpetrating violent behavior as well as receiving it. However, we don't do couples work with couples who are in a relationship that is still violent. And if someone is primarily seeking care for their aggressive behavior, we don't provide care to them.
Thank you, Ellen. I want to be mindful of time. We're close to the end, and I can hand it back to Kate for closing remarks.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you to our community advisory board. Thank you to our patient leadership team. Thank you to our presenters today. And thank you to the Susan B. Anthony team, Kirsten, Catherine, and John, who not only envisioned the possibility of doing these community forums during COVID, but actually implemented it in a way that now warehouses them so they're available to people who can't join us should you choose to share it later. You will receive a link to the tape recorded video. It will be on YouTube. And we will also provide the HEAL video, which we're excited to share, and a couple of other resources. One resource is a diagram that explains policy landscapes that can be used in grammar and middle schools to help begin the conversations about civic duty for public policy changing the lives of people through health and wellness. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.